This Mini Cooper was built for show, not actually to function. So we bought it with the intention of making it actually work and to save its life from being a billboard to being an actual off-roading machine. And this is how we did it. This video is sponsored by Era.
Well, time to see if we can't get this little teeny tiny Mini Cooper running. So small. There's a lot to do here, but first I just want to kind of see if I can just hook up some wiring for the engine, hook it up to a battery, see if it'll turn over, and then maybe hook up a temporary fuel system, check if it runs, and then go from there.
Is that like a peanut?
It's not like a peanut, that is a peanut. You first.
Maybe Will wants it.
Nobody wants that. Oh gosh, this thing is a nightmare. In many ways, it would be easier to start from scratch. Oh, I knew this thing was a nightmare when we saw it, but at that point, we were too far in to
Yeah, we were pretty committed by the time we got there.
Very committed. Not that I regret it, but so far the most concerning thing I've found electronically is, what does this go to?
Oh. Oh no.
That's a very big plug. My guess is maybe, I don't know if this thing had something that controlled the transmission. Like this transmission's pretty basic.
Not often you need a ladder to work on your Mini Cooper.
Most people don't, I think. I got it to crank, which is pretty easy, because I just identified the wires that I assume went to the ignition switch, based on location and color and size and such. Not color, I don't know anything about the color, but just at a guess. So these two wires here make it crank, which sounds all exciting, but I have no idea what wires need to be hooked together to power up the computer or the fuel pump or any of the other things that we need, which really all we should need is a fuel pump and the computer. And if I can't figure out the fuel pump wiring, I can just make my own fuel pump wiring, because we don't even have a fuel pump here. I need to figure that out still. I've just slapped a spark plug into one of the plug wires here, and I'm going to find a nice convenient spot to put it to ground where I can see it, and then I'm just going to crank it over and see what happens. Predictably, nothing. This one I did figure out through trial and error that if I connect that to ground, it turns on a relay. Which relay? Nobody knows, but it's a relay. I figured out from the pinout that this yellow and white wire here is the power wire for ignition on and start. And so I'm taking this, which is just 12 volt, and putting it to that in the back of this plug. And you probably won't hear it on camera, but when you hook it up, a couple of relays click, and from a close distance, there's a faint whine coming from the computer. Doesn't have spark yet, but at least I got the computer to turn on. I was messing around with this last night, and firstly, I did some testing and found that these are, in fact, the fuel pump wires, and when you go to crank the engine, they actually get powered up. The ECU power to this bigger wire that's obviously the main power supply for the ignition, that will give it the power that it actually needs. And we can check spark here. And aha! Eureka! We have spark.
Premium.
Which means that this here little box is doing what it's meant to do. So, in theory, I believe if I spray some brake clean into that there throttle body while also cranking it over, it should start.
That is exciting.
Because I don't have a fuel system yet, but it should run regardless if we supply a fuel-like substance.
Should we get Edwin and Will for the first start of this?
Yeah, let's get the Swindle brothers over here. You guys ready to maybe hear this thing purr?
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna start by just kind of slathering a bit in there and see what happens when I crank it. And oh, hang on, wrong wire.
She's gonna fire, boys.
No way!
Yeah!
That's
Fired
premium.
right up.
We could probably drive around the yard with me sitting in the engine bay just spraying strart.
Well, we don't have steering.
Oh, it's like the War Boys in Mad Max. I
Yeah.
can just like spit it in there.
Nice! Oh yeah!
Wow, that was cool.
It runs like well.
Yeah.
Even off of just brake clean. Well, you know, there were times yesterday when I thought this thing was never gonna run, but overall that actually was a lot easier to get running than I expected. I mean, to be clear, we still have no fuel system, and this is the throttle.
Oh.
So there's many things to hook up before it's like properly running.
Yeah.
But it works. All right, powering up the Mini Cooper, see what it does. I hooked up the terminals and it definitely made some noises. I'll just tighten that down a little bit so it stays, and then I'll go inside and see if anything's working. Gee. Well, the windows seem to work. That's a good sign. Hey, hey! Door lock unlocked, so now, hey! The steering, it's just the shaft down there that's something's running into it. But. Well, that's pretty cool. It just turns on. Look at that, even the fan works. That's frickin' mint. Oh wait, we gotta find out for Edwin and Will. Oh, I have a gas tank up there. It probably doesn't like that.
Wait till you see what Ethan's about to show you.
Uh-oh. Where even is he? Oh, he's on the inside.
I'm inside.
Oh!
All right, check this out. And
AC?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's no. Yeah, the fan works.
Yeah.
Are you ready though?
Oh, I thought it was gonna be weeks until the sunroof worked.
No, I just hooked up the negative and positive and it all works. So we don't even need that giant ECU that's down there, which I didn't think we did, but you never know.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Closing the sunroof, it's a little, it might just be low on voltage, but you just have to give it a little bit of a push back there to get it to close. But yeah.
Wow.
Also, I love these switches.
Yeah. I like the interior of the Mini Cooper.
I've always
It's
loved
great.
Mini Cooper interiors. Like, this is a little wonky, but it's wonky in like a good way, I think.
Yeah, it's cute like
It's
the car.
cutesy and bubbly. Yeah, it's like yeah.
It's nice.
Oh, it's got little paddle shifters.
Nice. If we have this thing driving in any way whatsoever before the 4th of July parade, that would just be epic. It's like a Wish.com iRobot situation.
What the heck?
It's very helpful that now the driver's side door opens so I can get in here to the pedals and stuff. Oh, that's a very pleasing door chime. Listen to that.
Nice.
Yeah, now comes the really hard part of setting up all the working bits. The controls, brakes, throttle, steering. And I was just looking at the steering and they like have it hooked up to the orbital valve, but with like no carrier bearing or anything, so it just flops. It's a hydraulic steering setup, just like we put in the eBay Bronco we built last fall. called the orbital valve here, which is just a hydraulic thing that, you know, takes the steering input and turns it into hydraulic fluid going to the ram. But for whatever reason, the person who tried to set this up just, like, I don't know, failed. All of these U-joints were in there, plus the other U-joint with no sort of carrier bearing or thing to hold it, so the whole thing just goes. I think I'm gonna see if I can eliminate a few of these. I'll just move the whole orbital valve. It's already mounted to the frame, but it's mounted in a dumb spot where it's basically touching the exhaust, and all the lines would run into the engine mount, and the O2 sensor on the exhaust is smashed up against it, so like as soon as you drive for 5 seconds, it's gonna rip that off. So I think I'm just gonna cut that off and then figure out a new place to mount it where I don't need all of this dumb stuff. And then we'll go from there. These little U-joint caps are the same size between this and this. So this one's serviceable, this one's not, but I can press this one apart and get rid of this end, which is a square, and put on this end, which is a spline, and then I'll just mount the orbital valve just on the other side of the firewall so this can go straight to it, and then we don't need any other sort of swindly business. It's as straight as I can tell with what I have, so I'm going to put a little tack here and on the opposite side, and then I'll spin it. I have the chuck butted up against it to hold it in place, and I'll spin it around and see what it looks like with the way it's spinning. Cool. I'll put the ground back on. Obviously that's not going to be where the strength is, but it's a convenient place to tack it. So it looks like when we spin it. Well, if it were a drive shaft, that would be horrendous, but seeing as how it's a steering yoke, steering shaft, I think it'll probably work. I think that ought to work. The metals were kind of bizarre in terms of welding. I'm not sure what sort of alloy or what was going on there, but I think it's all welded solid. I had this little piece of the shaft in there just to fill up the space and to help it be more sturdy. So I welded that to there, and then I had it too far through, so I had to die grind it out so it gets the articulation. But I believe this will work. And with that, I think it's about lunchtime. I bet this is gonna be loud.
While the Mini Cooper airs down, let me tell you about our sponsor, Air Up. For the first time in history, you can experience scent-flavored water. You have all these pods, all these flavors here. You just take one, stick it on, and you can use it as a normal water bottle, or you can lift this little tab up right here, and it tastes like watermelon. It tricks your mind into thinking water actually tastes good, which is way good for me because I never drink water. I think it's very gross. I know it's good for me, but flavored water's better. My personal favorite flavor is cucumber. It matches my water bottle.
And it matches the Mini Cooper.
Yeah, I just really like the flavor of cucumber. There's something just so good about it. That thing's been going for a while. We did the whole ad and it's still airing down. Well, we're getting aired up. Get your own Air Up water bottle by visiting the link in our description and see all the flavors available. Am I allowed to have these in my back pocket? Use code GRINDHARD for 20% off today. Now let's get back to building this thing.
In theory, this bracket is the right length, and this notch is the right angle to line up with the corner of the frame. And of course, random hexagons because hexagons. So let's see, we'll make a file here. Went bad. It went a little wonky, but what happened there is when it cut through here, the whole plate went doink. It was just a weird old warped piece of steel, but it'll work. Clean that up, assuming it fits. There we have it. Steering valve mount bracket thing. You'll notice I left a section down the middle that's solid. That's so I can put a brace across it this way so that it's rigid in both directions. Although I may also just do it along the sides as well. We'll see. Come on. Now is the moment that we find out how far away from the shop we can go with the welding cart. Yes, all-terrain welding cart. Maybe Harbor Freight should make one of those. They have an all-terrain creeper over there. Just an all-terrain welding cart. Big knobby tires. Oh, it helps if you give it a ground clamp. Oh yes, my best weld ever. Ah, that looks a little better. Still looks like not great. I was digging through all the parts that came with this and looking at getting the fuel system set up so it can run properly, but the tank that came with it is just a really dumb size. It doesn't fit anywhere. I was thinking of maybe just putting it in the trunk there temporary, but it doesn't fit there. It's too tall to fit anywhere under here without like completely rerouting the exhaust. I ordered up a smaller one, or well, actually not smaller, it might even be bigger, but a different shape that'll fit better in places. The thing about this one is that if you mounted it underneath, you wouldn't be able to fill it because this is just like a, you know, cap that you would open and fill this directly. Oh, dog is, you know, got opinions on it. Point is, it wouldn't be particularly easy to fill, so I got one that's got a little neck on it that you could add a filler neck to in case we want to mount it underneath. So that's on the way, and as well as, of course, a fuel filter, fuel pump, and fuel lines, because we didn't get any of those things with it. So, while we're waiting for that, I'm going to keep going with some stuff in the engine bay. Right now I'm sorting through all the steering parts to see what we have. It came with a full hydro setup, so this is the reservoir. I was just checking to make sure we have all the fittings and such for hoses and whatnot, so I'll kind of go through that and make sure we have all the right stuff. And then I think it came with a pump as well that's built for this hydraulic setup. Then I'll need to mount that somewhere. Goal here is to get it running properly by the end of this video. So get the fuel tank at least, you know, temporarily mounted or hooked up, plumbed, get the wires run to it so that we can start it and make sure that it actually runs. Because it runs on brake clean, but that doesn't mean that the fuel injectors work.
I was just thinking, if the fuel pressure rails are like done for, we could like set up a servo on a brake clean can and then just like quick disconnect brake cleans and then
that'd be a very, very expensive way to run a car.
You just stop at O'Reilly's, pick up like 100 brake clean cans and just off you go.
You heard the man. Brake clean injection. Something that I noticed immediately when we went to pick this up. So it came with this hydraulic steering ram, and it had brackets already welded to this track bar here and welded to the axle. And the brackets are fine. I don't know that's necessarily exactly how I would have done it, but all right. But the thing is, it was done just to keep this thing from steering so that it could be towed around in a straight line. Because right now, well, it's a little off, but if you were to bolt this into this right now, it would be maxed out, the ram would be maximum contracted, with the steering straight, which means it would only steer that way.
Oh.
So what I'm gonna do instead is center it like it should be. I'll try to get the wheels as straight as possible, and then I'll figure out how much travel this has, and then run it out to exactly half of that travel, and then I'll cut these brackets off and re-weld them on. I'm not even sure that this will stay the way that it is. I don't think it's the best solution, but it'll work to just get everything working, and then if it breaks or is a weak point, then we'll modify it later. The trick is getting to where you can see it, but you're not getting sparks in your face.
Close enough. I think it would be safe to define a smidgen as a 16th.
Would it though? Because like a 16th is already a common measurement. So like maybe it should be defined as something different than that, because otherwise like that could just
A 32nd. 2 smidgens for 16th.
maybe something like that. Now we just need to tighten those, which those look like not the same size. If you were trying to win a rock bouncing competition or even a rock crawling competition, this whole setup would probably be pretty terrible, because it's got this flimsy, relatively, little bar right out front where you could bash it on rocks. But, you know, we're not doing that. And with these tires and this body, you couldn't really do that much on that. You know, you couldn't win those things anyway, especially with this slow little engine powering these 46-inch tires. So, for what this thing's gonna do in the near future, this will work. And if we upgrade everything else, then we can upgrade the steering later. But for now, it should do the trick. I was thinking I'd have to have somebody make hydraulic lines, but then I realized these ones are, they work kind of like an AN fitting, but for hydraulic lines. And so they thread themselves onto the hose, and then you screw this end in here and it jams it inside of there, and it's nice and solid. So that means that if we have enough of this, we could actually just hook up the steering today, assuming I could get the pump mounted. Okay, that's all the way on. Take this and get an even bigger crescent wrench. This little, or I could just get the actual right size. That would be too far to walk. Actually, no one would even have to take a step. If you just like leaned over, you could reach the toolbox.
What size do you need?
5/8. So I hooked this end to the ram and then ran it up to where the orbital valve is, and I marked the like absolute minimum length. And this is the longer side. It goes farther to the far side of the ram. So if that's less than half, then we have enough. So with that in mind, given that this is the longer one, I'm actually going to add a few inches so that they're more equal, and just so we have a little extra for routing it into places. But that's pretty close to even. Look at that. We have power steering lines on the high pressure end anyway. We don't need a whole lot of extra slack, just a little bit for jiggly wiggly. You know, if this thing had proper suspension and good flex, then it would be a different story, but it doesn't. I've got the ram end of the steering lines figured out. It's time to figure out the pump. And I'm looking at it, and I think this pump is actually like for this engine. It seems to kind of match the bolt pattern and all that. I'm going to assume that it's a different like rate of pump for running fully hydraulic, I don't actually know. I'm gonna just replace it anyway because we have the brand new part. Spider. The steering kit came with almost everything we need. This is the hose in question here. It's actually for the snowplow off my skid steer. The ram on it blew up. Because it means we'll be able to get the entire power steering system plumbed today. Means that once it runs properly, it'll be able to steer properly too.
These are good things.
And then all we really need is brakes. Well, brakes, throttle, shifter, trans-cooler lines. Come on, are you gonna go? Nice. We don't want to use the press to put this back on because you'd be pressing through the pump and you'd probably damage stuff, but pressing it out should be fine because we're just getting it off the old pump. Nice. Yeah, very nice. I found the bolt that threads into the inside of that steering pump shaft there. And then I have some spacers. So it'll, in theory, tighten down nice and straight. Wibbly wobbly. Now in theory, this should just suck it right down on there. Oh, nice and wobbly too. Okay, now how am I gonna hold that from spinning? They make a tool for this, but I do not have said tool, so here we are. I made a soft pulley clamp.
Oh, that's premium with the old belt. Sometimes I'll do that, like when I'm taking off like the big bolt on a Subaru for the pulley. You can like sometimes wrap it around and clamp it, but that one's like ultra stiff. This is the part where you all run away.
Oh no.
I was quoting Shrek. No. This is the part where I yell at someone because every piece of this steering kit was here, except for one of these fittings. This is the return line back to the reservoir from the orbital valve. So it's a low pressure line. And one of its fittings is missing. Every other part here, that one, gone. Luckily, I have a drawer full of random crap, and maybe I have one.
I just like that we still have this computer here.
Yeah, we still have that whole plasma cutter table thing from when we did the eBay Bronco and had to get a bigger table last minute. So this is AN6 size fitting, which is the same as that. So actually it's even better because now I don't need the hose clamps. I have two of these and they're just way more... Oh. Now that's really in there. I think that is complete hydraulic steering. Need to go around and make sure everything's tight, but we got the new pump mounted, got all the lines run. Here's the reservoir mounted. This may be a temporary location, but it'll work for now. We got the return line to the reservoir. We got the feed line to the pump. We got the pressure line to the orbital valve, both lines to the ram. That's hydraulic steering. Ready to go. That actually went a lot quicker than I thought because I thought I might have to make a custom mount for the pump, and also I didn't realize that these were do-it-yourself hydraulic lines. I thought I was going to have to get my friend Casey to crimp them for me. He has the crimper tool. Nice. I think we'll have to have Will hop in and see if the steering works. That's what I'm here for. Oh yeah, that sucked
Steering
down.
man Willie.
That sucked down a lot. Top that off a little bit. Well, I'd say we have steering. All right. I say all right as if he's gonna shut it off. I'm the one over here running the fuel system and the ignition. I was like, all right, you can shut it off. Oh wait, that's me. It works though.
Yeah, really well. It's really smooth.
Nice.
And that little tiny steering wheel is so funny. But I hope that no one ever has to experience this thing stalling out in a situation where you had to turn, because there's no way without the engine running that you would be able to steer this.
No.
No.
Working on a temporary radiator hose solution here, so we can get some water in that engine for all of our test starts. Not sure what I'm going to do for a fan yet. I'll worry about that later. We can't even drive it yet because the transmission's not all hooked up properly. Oh,
so,
yes.
so that size.
Yes, that's the big zip ties.
I didn't even know we had some that big. I didn't even know they made them that big.
This isn't even, like, they make like 4-foot long zip ties. This is just like this is a medium large. So I have this weird skinnier hose that runs down here and kind of around in the right way, and then a little chunk of aluminum pipe as a coupler. And then this hose is larger in diameter because the outlet from the water pump here is much larger than this piece of tube. So anyway, it's not perfect, but it'll work for now. This thing's got so much space under it. I can sit on the off-road creeper and be like fully upright underneath here. Next up is the top radiator hose, and you'll notice a distinct lack of a radiator cap on this radiator. So I anticipated that, and I ordered one that just fits in line. So it'll go right here into this hose and this hose. Actually, maybe if I drill a hole through there, I could tighten it. Yeah. I would just consider swapping out this radiator for a bigger one that's got a filler neck on it, or I mean a filler cap. If we have overheating problems, I will do that. But the thing is, being made by BMW, this thing is very, very, very integrated. Like, there's a plastic core support that goes from this frame rail to that one, and the radiator's just like kind of part of that. It'd be kind of complicated to swap it out. I mean, not that I couldn't do it, but it's not that easy compared to a lot of other vehicles. And this is why you don't throw away old scraps of radiator hose unless they're all screwed up. I figured I'd tidy up the engine bay a little bit and find homes for certain things like this computer and whatnot, and in the process, delete a bunch of excess wires. Obviously, none of these wires were necessary for it to run. There's a chance that I may need some of them for something at some point. But I don't need this plug because it had nothing going to it. I'm just gonna snip all of these wires, then I'll pull them all out and snip them back, and I'll leave enough that we could, splice to them later if we needed to, but just simplify and reduce the forbidden spaghetti.
Did you bring the sauce, Will?
What? Yeah, I did.
Spaghetti.
Yep.
Spaghetti Willy.
Habanero spaghetti sauce.
Habanero.
In my back pocket.
Ah.
With your phone?
Edwin would like that.
Yes.
Oh, sketty, 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 sketty. Look at that. The engine bay already looks dramatically less terrible. We've got all the wiring for the engine cleaned up. I'll just have these 3 wires, which is going to be the, start and ignition wires. Got the wires hooked up so that the power wire for the Mini Cooper stuff is also on the positive terminal. Got the battery kind of stuffed down in there a little better. I went in search of a gas pedal because this one had that electronic pedal right there, which does us no good. So I yoinked that out of there. And I went on a search for a gas pedal. This is what I found. It came out of the pink minivan, which was on the Unimog chassis when we bought it last year. What's really crazy is this is the cable. This is out of a Mazda minivan, right? That's how it clipped into there. Okay, fine, good. Cable doesn't do me any good by itself. But watch this. Here's the cable for the engine.
Oh. Oh.
Mazda and Jeep were on the same page in the 90s. Wait, this Jeep was a 95. Actually, the minivan I think is a little newer, like a 2000, 2003. I just have to make a mount plate for it now, which should be pretty easy. And then we will have throttle. In the middle of the dash here, there's a little emblem of this thing being up on like a big lift, which is funny because it's really tall right now. Let's see. Will it come back?
Should figure out a way to keep that light on all the time. Oh, the rain's coming, Will. A plate for that pedal.
Yeah, just a scrap of aluminum. Just drilling some holes to mount the pedal to first. Got the plate in. I'm just making some adjustments to the pedal angle. It's a great thing about a little steel rod for a pedal. You can just bend it every which way you want. Well, we may not have brakes, but we got a throttle. That actually went pretty easily. There isn't a stop for it, so right now it's just pulling pretty hard on the cable, which could break at some point. This Mini Cooper seems to have a electronic brake booster and ABS system. Obviously I don't want ABS, but ABS won't do anything without wheel speed sensors anyway. So, rather than retrofit the other master cylinder in here with a vacuum booster, I'm just gonna hook up all the fuel or all the brake lines, because they're already run to all four corners, roughly. So I'll just hook those all up and see what happens. I don't suspect it's going to be very good because this is a little bitty master cylinder made for little bitty wheel cylinders. But there's a chance that it might just, by accident, work really well. Maybe we should put a little 4-cylinder Cummins in this and make it like the Bronco. Like a smaller version of it, but with the bigger tires. Or we just put the same 12 valve. Ooh. No. I'm honestly not that big of a Cummins fan for things that aren't meant for hauling. I think they're great for towing and big trucks, but for like performance machines, I don't know. They're very heavy.
He's a Subaru supporter, not a Cummins supporter.
I didn't say
That's
that.
what he said.
Ah. We could put an STI engine in this. That'd be hilarious. It would be pretty tricky to fit one in here, though.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
Yeah, well, the frame rails are just really close together because they're made for an inline engine.
Yeah.
And boxers are like a mile wide.
They are.
Well, seeing as how it's raining today, Bjorn and I are hanging out under the Mini Cooper where it's dry. Because obviously this doesn't fit in the shop. And we don't have the new shop done yet. Also partly because it's raining. We can't pour the slab while it's raining. So anyway, and then this is the fuel pump wiring. So I'm just kind of zip tying that up and running it back. Just kind of organizing some stuff and getting this routed and tied out of the way so it doesn't get melted on the exhaust. What we have here is the shifter out of the Mini Cooper. And I have it out and apart because it has all sorts of like mechanisms that lock it into park and other gears. It has this little button here, which you can see is just that, which locks it into, park. But I don't need any of the rest of them, and I was trying to shift it yesterday when we had it turned on, and it would like shift into, I don't know, drive or neutral, and then like this system here, whatever this is, would lock it so you couldn't shift it out of that gear. So I took it apart to delete all of those little safety thingies because the cable reaches the transmission and should work just fine to shift it. It's even got, you know, an adjustable thing on the end here to bolt onto. So I just had to take it apart to figure out how it all works and get rid of basically this little thing here, and then also there's this, which I believe is a solenoid that pokes out and sticks into that hole there to lock it into park. So in theory, I should be able to just unplug that, and then it won't be able to run it at all. Put it back together, put it back in, and see if it still turns on everything. I mean, it should. It should be able to turn on all the power to everything without having this work, so. Back to the Monster Cooper, as I'm calling it. And we got a more appropriately sized and shaped fuel tank. 30 feet of AN6 fuel line, a whole bunch of fittings, and a most premium fuel pump with filter. This is the same one I used on the 6x6 mini truck. Works really well. It's cheap. It has a nice mounting bracket built in. It's got a filter and a fuel pump all in one little unit. It might be wise to actually mount this in the engine bay where it's easier accessible than underneath the car. There is no diagram that comes with this as to what the flow is, so I have to go check. Hey, if we film me checking, then I can't forget this time. It is in pump, out filter. That does make sense.
Into the pump, out the filter.
That's what they say.
It's coming, Will.
Dude, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's coming, and I have to drive home at the speed limit in it. Premium. Oh, I should have worn like a rain jacket today or something. It's gonna get wet on the bike. Oh!
It's coming, Will.
That's...
Get ready for some downpour, boys. Edwin's bringing the monsoon with him.
That's
Assuming he's actually still coming up.
He said he's on his way.
Oh, did he? Because he said it was monsooning in town.
Yeah, just in time for the storm.
Yeah, he's bringing it with him. Luckily, we're not camping or it'd be extra intense.
Hey!
It's so crazy how when you're in here, like, you don't see what's underneath you. It's just like you're in a regular Mini.
But like two minis tall.
Yeah.
Like if you just look at the interior, you're like, oh yeah, just a Mini. And then you're like, oh, yeah, the ground is way down there. Check it out. I was just looking at trails to take this thing on when it's driving, because like it's gonna be a while before it's capable enough to do something like the trail we did in the mini truck.
Yeah.
But we could do like we could go Mini Cooper overlanding and go like through all of the. There's so many trails out on the backside of the lake. We could like cruise through all of those. There's a bunch of like watchtowers back there.
You should zoom out. How close are the wildfires? Because it seemed like it was kind of smoky on the lake yesterday.
It looks like there's a few over in Washington, a couple farther south of us, and then I think
Canada's just lit up.
I think most of the smoke is
Yeah.
all in Canada.
That's one of my favorite parts of Onyx is just being like, can I go here safely?
Yeah, right.
Or is it going to be on fire in 20 minutes?
Why is it hazy today? Oh yeah, because there's fires everywhere. Isn't it just so wacky?
Yeah.
Like it's like a little spaceship, and then it docks. It's hilarious. I'm glad that the guy had the keys still, because this would have been near impossible to get the interior working without this.
Really?
So far, my best idea for getting it is to just use the wiper button, the wipers, because it's a momentary. Like anything that's a
It'll be like
momentary
a Mad
button.
Max,
Yeah.
they all have their own start sequences.
Or like a horn. Like you just push the horn to start it.
Yeah.
Got the fuel pump wired up, and I even tested it. You touch the ignition wires together, or turn the ECU on wires, and it cycles for a second, so that's good. So I'm gonna dump some fuel into the tank here. Obviously, it's permanently mounted right here. This is where it's gonna live, just dangling underneath. No, This is just temporary. I want to test it before I mount it anyway, so time for a little bit of the go juice, and then we get to find out if this thing actually runs or if it just runs on brake clean. If this doesn't work, we're just going to install a little seat for Will inside the engine bay, and he can sit there and with a crate of brake clean, and he can just sit there and just warboy.
And you'll be like, more power, and I'll take out 2.
Yeah, and they're unbelievably cheap. I'm never building one again. Well, actually, I'm going to build a lot of them because they always have to be custom. It's rare that we could just buy one, but this is like 120, 150 bucks.
So cheap. Really?
With the cap, the fittings, and it even comes with a fuel gauge. Or not a gauge, but a sending unit for the gauge. This.
Oh, I heard fuel pouring back into the fuel cell.
Did you?
Yeah.
Kind of dripping back in. Let's see what happens. There we go!
That's awesome!
Just had to get that fuel system primed up.
Oh, he sounds so much better on fuel. That's awesome.
Yeah! That's not bad! I don't have any water in it yet, so we don't want to run it for very long. But,
That was great.
yeah. It runs pretty good.
We're gonna be wheeling in no time.
Wheeling.
Yeah, I mean,
A wheel all over
I
the
just
place.
got to hook up the, well, I got to put in a trans cooler, make sure the transmission has fluid in it, fill up the water in the radiator, and most importantly, brakes.
This is what Crocs are made for.
Whoop!
Oh, the steering's easy. So easy.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. They see me rolling. They hating.
They see you rolling and then they run away because they think we're going to get run over by this monstrosity. We decided to try out a new game here, and we'll post the results at the end of next week's video. I'm going to try to beat AI at, anything, which is kind of difficult. So over here we have the video that, the algorithm and AI thinks you want to watch, and over here we have what I think you want to watch next. So who's going to win, me or the algorithm?